Sweet Tea had always believed that marriage was a journey filled with highs and lows, a partnership that required patience, understanding, and unconditional support. She had faced her share of challenges with Dr. Gregory, arguments that felt endless, nights when words failed to convey the depth of her frustration, and quiet mornings filled with the tension of unspoken disappointments. Yet she convinced herself that these struggles were ordinary, just small obstacles that all couples encountered. Little did she know, life had a far more devastating twist waiting for her, a betrayal so complete that it would shatter the very foundation of her world. For years, Sweet Tea had invested everything into their relationship. She had given Dr. Gregory her heart, her trust, her time, and her unwavering loyalty. Every decision, every hope, every dream was tied to building a life with him. She believed in the promises he whispered late at night, the plans they made over quiet dinners, and the vision of a future they both painted in vivid colors. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, cracks began to appear. Small, easily dismissible signs. A fleeting look of distraction, excuses that didn't quite add up, and moments when he seemed distant as though part of him existed in another world she could never access. At first, she brushed them off. She told herself that all relationships had rough patches, that love required patience, and that loyalty demanded perseverance. But destiny had other plans. The truth she eventually uncovered was not a minor flaw, nor a passing indiscretion. It was a life-altering revelation that left her gasping for air. Dr. Gregory was not simply hiding a secret. He had been living an entirely separate life, one that Sweet Tea had no idea existed. It started innocuously enough. Perhaps it was a misplaced receipt, a hurried text, or a small inconsistency in his stories. At first, she hesitated to confront him, fearing that she might be imagining things. But as the signs multiplied, as the inconsistencies piled up, a gnawing suspicion took root. She tried to ignore it, to convince herself that she was overreacting. But deep down, she sensed that something far bigger than she could imagine was unfolding behind her back. And then, one fateful day, reality hit with the force of a sledgehammer. Dr. Gregory had a secret family, an entire hidden life that had been kept carefully away from her. It wasn't a rumor, a fleeting affair, or a misstep. It was a fully formed existence, complete with commitments, responsibilities, and a life that he had deliberately excluded her from. The news crushed her. It wasn't just heartbreak, it was humiliation, betrayal, and the suffocating feeling of being utterly replaced in the life she had fought so hard to build. Her chest felt as though it had been hollowed out, her heart heavy with the weight of every lie, every omission, every false promise. She thought back to the countless times she had defended him, the times she had stood by his side while shielding his reputation, the moments she had forgiven his unexplained absences, and all the love she had poured into a marriage that, unbeknownst to her, existed only on her side of the equation. The magnitude of his deceit was staggering. Every ounce of trust, every hope for a future together, had been built on a foundation of lies. When Sweet Tea finally confronted Dr. Gregory, the encounter was far from the calm, reasoned conversation she had imagined in her mind. Tears streamed down her face, but her voice was steady, unflinching, and unwavering as she delivered the words that would change everything. "I want a divorce," she said, each syllable carrying the weight of betrayal, exhaustion, and newfound resolve. She told him to stay with the woman he had secretly chosen, to embrace the life he had hidden from her, and to never attempt to return. For the first time in years, Sweet Tea refused to bottle up her pain. She spoke of her loyalty, her dedication, and her unwavering belief that their marriage could withstand any storm. She reminded him, and herself, of the countless moments she had protected him, defended him, and tried to repair what could not be mended alone. But now, the truth was undeniable, and she refused to live a lie any longer. "I can't take this anymore," she confessed, her sobs raw, yet filled with an unmistakable clarity. Dr. Gregory's response was predictably hollow. There were no apologies, no admissions of guilt, no signs of genuine remorse, only confusion, excuses, and silence that did nothing to alleviate the pain he had caused. It became painfully clear to Sweet Tea that this was not a mistake. It was a deliberate choice, a reflection of the man she had married and the life he had secretly built for himself. And in that moment, she understood something profound. Walking away was the only path to preserving her peace, her dignity, and her self-respect. But leaving was only the beginning. The days that followed were marked by an unexpected, cruel twist. Public scrutiny. Word of Dr. Gregory's double life spread like wildfire. Friends, acquaintances, and strangers seemed to know before she did. Whispers and gossip following her wherever she went. Every notification, every message, every comment online felt like another blow to a heart still tender from betrayal. The private heartbreak she had endured had become public humiliation, forcing Sweet Tea to confront her grief under the unforgiving gaze of the world. Yet, in the midst of this chaos, something remarkable began to take root. Sweet Tea began to reconstruct her understanding of her marriage, replaying moments in vivid detail, trying to pinpoint when things had started to unravel. She remembered nights spent crying alone, begging for honesty, and clinging to promises that had been shattered. She recalled the signs she had ignored, the late nights, the unexplained absences, the conversations he avoided. In hindsight, each small inconsistency was a thread leading to the full tapestry of his deception. One of the deepest wounds came from reflecting on their struggles to conceive a child. Sweet Tea had endured painful treatments, each one a testament to her hope and commitment to building a family together. Every step was taken with the belief that they were partners in the truest sense. Yet in parallel, Dr. Gregory had already created the very family she had longed for, with someone else. The realization that she had been replaced long before she even suspected it was devastating, a bitter confirmation of the duplicity she had unknowingly endured. The days following the revelation were some of the heaviest Sweet Tea had ever endured. Everywhere she went, it seemed as if the world was aware of Dr. Gregory's hidden life before she even fully processed it herself. Friends whispered behind their hands. Casual acquaintances cast curious glances, and even strangers seemed to know the story before she had the chance to tell it. Each notification on her phone, a message, a social media alert, a comment, felt like a fresh wound reopening. The private pain of betrayal had transformed into a public spectacle, and the humiliation was nearly unbearable. Yet, amidst the chaos and judgment, something unexpected began to emerge: clarity. Sweet Tea began retracing every moment of her marriage, analyzing the fragments of memory she had once dismissed or rationalized. The nights she cried alone, the times she begged him to open up, the promises he had made that had ultimately proved hollow. They all became pieces of a puzzle that now formed a picture she could no longer ignore. Every subtle act, every sudden trip, every unexplained absence now carried a meaning she had refused to see at the time. The man she had loved with her entire heart was not the man she thought she knew. Her grief was intertwined with anger. She recalled standing by him during their most vulnerable moments, fertility struggles that had left her physically and emotionally drained. She had endured painful treatments, whispered hopes into the dark of the night, and convinced herself that they were in this together. Meanwhile, Dr. Gregory had been living another reality entirely, a reality that mirrored her deepest desires yet existed with someone else entirely. It was a betrayal of a magnitude that left her both horrified and enraged. She had not just been deceived, she had been replaced. Determined not to let this injustice remain hidden, Sweet Tea decided to speak her truth. She began to share her story publicly, unafraid of the reactions or judgments that might come. Every word she spoke was laced with the pain she had carried silently for years, but also with a strength she hadn't realized she possessed. She explained the loyalty she had given from day one, the unwavering support she had provided, and the love she had invested fully, only to be met with lies and deception. When Dr. Gregory tried to deflect, pretending ignorance or shock at her anger, Sweet Tea saw through it immediately. "Don't act innocent," she told him firmly. "You knew exactly what you were doing. You didn't make a mistake. You made choices, and those choices destroyed us." There was no hesitation, no trembling, no pleading. For the first time, she spoke without fear, without self-doubt, without the weight of his manipulation holding her back. The response from the public was overwhelming. Messages poured in from women who had faced similar betrayals, from people who understood the pain of devotion met with deceit. Fans rallied around her, offering support, validation, and a sense of solidarity she hadn't realized she had been missing. For the first time in years, Sweet Tea felt truly seen, not as a victim, but as a woman reclaiming her narrative, reclaiming her dignity, and refusing to let a lifetime of lies define her. As she shared more of her story, more layers of Dr. Gregory's duplicity began to surface. Conversations leaked, photographs emerged, and new details of his secret life came to light. The hidden family, shocking as it had been, was only the beginning. There were whispers of multiple women, overlapping relationships, and carefully constructed lies designed to protect his image while exploiting the trust of those around him. Sweet Tea realized that the man she had fought for, defended, and loved with her entire being was a stranger, a man who had mastered deception and manipulation. Every new revelation cut deeper than the last. She recalled every unexplained absence, every late-night call, every hurried trip. She'd always assumed these moments were innocent: stress at work, unexpected responsibilities, fleeting distractions. But now she saw them for what they truly were: a carefully maintained facade. And the guilt she had carried for questioning him, for doubting his sincerity, evaporated entirely. She had been protecting him from the world, and now she understood that all along he had been protecting himself from her knowledge, from accountability, from the truth. One particularly devastating moment came in the form of a message from another woman, someone who claimed that Dr. Gregory had promised her the same future he had once promised Sweet Tea. The same words, the same gestures, the same empty assurances. Sweet Tea's hands shook as she read the messages, her heart aching at the realization that she was not the only one deceived, not the only one who had been manipulated into believing in his love. "How could he do this to me? To all of us?" she whispered, her voice trembling but her resolve solidifying. She wasn't just heartbroken anymore, she was furious. And that fury was paired with a newfound clarity. Sweet Tea finally confronted Dr. Gregory with this evidence. As expected, he tried to twist the story, to play the victim, to claim misunderstanding and miscommunication. But she no longer wavered. "You never loved me the way I loved you," she said, her voice firm and unwavering. "I gave you every part of myself, and you used it against me." Her eyes held no fear, no confusion, no longing for the man he pretended to be. She had seen the truth, and there was no turning back. With each revelation, Sweet Tea's strength grew. The layers of deception that had once kept her bound in doubt and pain now became the fuel for her empowerment. She understood that this was not just a story of infidelity or betrayal. It was a story of survival, of reclaiming oneself after being gaslit and deceived for years. The man she had married was gone, replaced in her mind by the reality of a life built on lies, secrecy, and manipulation. And for the first time, she embraced the freedom that came from seeing him clearly. Even as more shocking truths emerged, Sweet Tea remained steadfast. Old messages, screenshots, rumors, and confessions surfaced, revealing that Dr. Gregory had juggled multiple women, lives, and lies over the years. She realized that every excuse she had ever accepted, every explanation she had ever rationalized, had been unnecessary. The quiet nights, the random trips, the sudden attitude shifts, they were never innocent. They were the behavior of a man who had perfected the art of living multiple lives without consequence. Yet, amidst the chaos, Sweet Tea found her voice louder than ever. She spoke openly, fearlessly, and with a precision that left no room for doubt. She addressed Dr. Gregory not as a husband she once loved, but as a man accountable for the life he had chosen to lead. And as the story spread, the power shifted. No longer was she the victim hidden behind closed doors. She became the woman standing in the light, demanding the truth, commanding respect, and refusing to allow her pain to be diminished or dismissed. Even as Sweet Tea unraveled Dr. Gregory's web of lies, life had one final, devastating curveball in store. She thought she had faced the worst, uncovered every betrayal, and seen the full extent of his deception. But one unexpected message arrived, from a woman Sweet Tea didn't recognize. At first, she assumed it was simply another account of Dr. Gregory's duplicity, a story similar to the others she had already endured. But this message revealed a truth even darker and more unimaginable than everything she had uncovered so far. The woman claimed that she had known Dr. Gregory years before Sweet Tea had entered his life. More shockingly, she asserted that he had promised her a future, introduced her to a secret family, and cultivated a life that predated Sweet Tea entirely. The hidden family wasn't a recent mistake or a passing indiscretion. It had been meticulously established long before Sweet Tea had ever dreamed of building a life with him. Worse yet, the woman claimed that Dr. Gregory had portrayed Sweet Tea not as his wife, but as the side person in his life, a role reversed in his manipulative narrative. The man she had given her entire heart to had systematically rewritten reality, painting himself as a victim while secretly enjoying multiple lives, multiple relationships, and the comfort of a double or even triple existence. The revelation sent Sweet Tea's world spinning. The betrayal she had already endured felt magnified tenfold. She wasn't just a woman wronged in love. She had been living a constructed lie, manipulated into believing she was the center of his life, while the reality was that she had been deceived from the start. The pain she had felt initially transformed into something sharper, rage mixed with clarity. She finally saw the man she'd married in full, unfiltered truth. A man defined not by love or loyalty, but by secrecy, selfishness, and the cold, calculated exploitation of those around him. When Sweet Tea confronted Dr. Gregory one final time, there was no room for tears, no space for pleading, no hope of reconciliation. She had exhausted her capacity for patience, for forgiveness, and for pretending that this man was anything more than he had shown himself to be. She stood tall, her eyes unwavering, her voice calm, but resolute. "This is the real you," she said. "Not the man I loved, not the man I fought for, just a man full of secrets, lies, and broken promises." And with that, she walked away. There was no hesitation, no backward glance, no lingering doubts. She left behind not only a marriage built on deception, but also the pain, the humiliation, and the version of herself that had once tolerated lies. In leaving, Sweet Tea reclaimed everything that had been stolen from her dignity, her power, and her sense of self. What made this story different, what made it extraordinary, was not merely the betrayals she survived, but the transformation she underwent as a result. Sweet Tea did not crumble under the weight of heartbreak. She did not shrink into silence or despair. She emerged stronger, sharper, and more determined than ever to define her life on her own terms. The man who had caused her so much pain, Dr. Gregory, was left with nothing but the consequences of his own choices. Meanwhile, Sweet Tea walked into a new chapter with clarity, empowerment, and an unshakable sense of self-worth. Her journey became a testament to resilience. She turned her pain into a story of strength, inspiring others who had endured betrayal, manipulation, or heartbreak to reclaim their voices and demand their own peace. She spoke openly about the loyalty she had offered, the love she had poured into a marriage that existed only in her perception, and the courage it took to finally walk away. In doing so, she transformed from a woman defined by her suffering into a symbol of empowerment, proof that surviving deceit can lead to the most profound self-discovery. Dr. Gregory's attempts to manipulate, excuse, or gaslight her were no longer effective. Sweet Tea had seen the full extent of his life of lies, and she would no longer allow anyone, including him, to distort her reality. Each revelation, each betrayal, and each confrontation strengthened her resolve. She was no longer living in fear of his deception. She was living in the light of her own truth. Even the public reaction, once a source of humiliation, became a platform for Sweet Tea's empowerment. Fans, friends, and strangers who had followed her story expressed support, admiration, and solidarity. Women who had experienced similar heartbreak reached out, sharing their own stories and finding hope in her courage. Where once the world's attention had felt like a punishment, it now became a stage for her resilience, a place where she could assert her strength and inspire others to rise from their own struggles. The final twist, the ultimate revelation of Dr. Gregory's premeditated deceit, might have been enough to break anyone, but for Sweet Tea, it became the catalyst for transformation. She realized that the lies, the betrayals, and the manipulations were never hers to carry. They were his to answer for. And by stepping away, by refusing to participate in a life constructed on deception, she reclaimed her agency, her voice, and her peace. In the end, Sweet Tea's story was not about the man she had married. It was about the woman she became in the process. From a loyal wife fighting to save a marriage built on lies, she emerged as a woman fighting for herself. Strong, unyielding, and unafraid to confront the truth, no matter how painful. She had walked through heartbreak, betrayal, and public scrutiny, and emerged stronger, more resilient, and fully aware of her own worth. Sweet Tea's decision to walk away was not just an act of survival, it was a declaration of empowerment. She left behind the pain, the deceit, and the false version of herself that had tolerated betrayal. She embraced a future defined not by the lies of others, but by her own strength, clarity, and unwavering sense of self. In doing so, she created an ending that no betrayal could diminish. A life rebuilt, a heart reclaimed, and a story rewritten on her own terms. Her final act, the one that set her apart from countless others who had been wronged, was not vengeance or retribution, it was transformation. Sweet Tea didn't just leave the marriage, she left the fear, the humiliation, and the doubt. She stepped into the next chapter of her life fully empowered, fully aware, and fully free. And that, ultimately, was the most powerful twist of all. While Dr. Gregory's lies defined the past, Sweet Tea's courage and resilience defined the future. And so, Sweet Tea rose from the ashes of a life built on deceit, stronger than she had ever been, and determined never to let anyone else write her story for her again. In the face of betrayal, public humiliation, and unimaginable heartbreak, she discovered the truth that would guide her forward. Her peace, her dignity, and her power were hers alone, and no one could take them from her.